Great. Good morning, everyone. Okay. Ingvild, thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you to all of the Konsoll organizers and volunteers who have helped make this such an awesome event. You know, yesterday you had said that you wanted this to be bigger and better from last year. I think you absolutely accomplished that, and I'm honored to be here, to be invited back for a second time speaking. I'm also honored that all of you got out so early to come see me. I know that the parties were fun last night, so I'm honored that you're here. Same goes to everybody who's watching the streaming event. Speaking of you, how many people came out to see me last year? How many, just a show of hands. Okay, keep your hands up. How many people saw me online on YouTube? Okay, so about maybe a quarter of you. Last year's presentation is certainly not a prerequisite for this, but I think that it will help you understand some of the principles that I'm going over. This presentation is meant to be kind of like a prequel to my presentation last year, kind of like, I guess, the Prometheus of marketing presentations. Except if a big spaceship comes rolling back behind me, I can run to the side. All right. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Emmy Jonassen, and I am the founder of a site called Indie Game Girl. You can find it at indiegamegirl.com. You can follow me on Twitter. You can send me an email. I love hearing from independent developers, so please don't be shy. I've been a marketing professional for about 10 years now, and I started in traditional advertising, so working for advertising agencies on a spread of brands from hotels to airlines to health insurance. And I often get asked how I got into marketing independent games. And after I worked in advertising, I left advertising because I really, for a while, wanted to develop games myself as an artist. So I went back to school to become a 3D artist, and after I was certified, I went right back into marketing right afterward, except I went to client side, marketing one product, and that was a game engine. And I was responsible for marketing that product to the independent game developer community. And that's where I first really developed my passion for independent games and my obsession with how can such talented people with these wonderful games just fail so miserably when they go to market. And what I discovered was that while developers are very talented and very proficient at programming and designing and the art, they tend to lack marketing capabilities, that marketing skill set. And when I looked online, I really saw why there wasn't too much support out there. So I kind of started Indie Game Girl as a hobby, and since then, that was 2 years ago, it's really transformed into something much bigger. And it is my passion, and that's why I'm here today. But let's move on to the presentation. And I'd like to start today with a very bold statement. And I don't want to offend anybody here. I'll explain this statement. But if there's one thing that you take away from my presentation and one thing that you remember, I really want it to be this. Because when you get to the marketing portion of your game, I want you to repeat this over and over and over in your mind until you get so sick of it, you almost throw up. And that is, good marketing is not about you, okay? Good marketing is not about you. Marketing, at its very essence, it's a form of communication that we use to talk to strangers. And we use it to ask strangers favors, right? And your favor is probably going to be something like, will you please buy my game? Or will you please download my game? Will you please write about my game, right? And as I look at this slide back here, I realize how creepy this looks. When I was working on my little 15-inch MacBook Pro, it looked a lot cooler. But I promise you, the strangers you're talking to aren't going to be like creepy figures like this. But they are going to be important people. Important people like your potential fans and the press. And I realize that I'm calling these people strangers, and I realize that you may have already developed a rapport with some of these people. You may be acquaintances, you may be friends, and I hope you have been doing that because that shows that you're being diligent about your marketing, you're starting early. But I call them strangers in the sense that it's not like you don't have a relationship with them like you do with your mom, right? If you went to one of these guys and said, will you please write about my game? They're not going to say to you, yes, honey, I love you so much. Of course I will write about your game, right? They're strangers. They don't know you like that. And because they're strangers, you have to give them a compelling reason to grant you your favor, right? And that compelling reason has to be why they will love your game, not why you think they will love your game. And this is a really important distinction that I want to make, because I know that this seems like, yeah, of course, I completely understand that, like very basic and very intuitive. And yes, in concept, I believe it is all of these things. Very basic, very intuitive, but my experience has taught me that this, in practice, is in fact very difficult for independent developers to execute. And I believe the reason for this is because everything it is to be indie, the indie process, what it is to become indie, going through the development of your indie game, really conditions us to think about ourselves. And if we look at the beginning, why you decide to become indie, this is a poll that a writer at Developed did of his Twitter community. And he asked his Twitter community, why are you an indie developer? I just put a couple of quotes up here. I'm not going to read them all, but I'm just going to read two. We have up here, because no one writes the games I want to play, right? Because I want to design games and then make them without them being horribly compromised. And I think, reading these quotes, a lot of us feel the same way. This is why we became indie, because we want to build the games that we believe in that no one else is making. But you can see we're at the very start of our journey is conditioning us to think about ourselves. And I don't say that in a bad way. I don't think this is a bad thing at all. I think being indie is beautiful. And I think the reason why such incredible games and such incredible pieces of art come out of our community is because of this conditioning. We control the entire integrity of the game from beginning to end. And that's why this happens. But as we move through the process, we become indie because something inside of us wants to do that. We're driven to do that. Our ideas for our games come from within. We develop the games ourselves, and then unless you have a budget, you're probably going to be the one marketing the game, right? So at this point, when you get to marketing, you've been so wrapped up in your own mind that it becomes very difficult to take a step back and look at your marketing from the perspective of one of your strangers, right? At this point, you're almost setting yourself up for failure, but it really does have to be about them. So at this point, the question really becomes, how do we shift our focus from ourselves, take that step back and really start thinking about our strangers? But more importantly, how do we ensure that that compelling reason we are communicating in our marketing is in fact the most compelling reason? Excuse me. And the only way to do this and increase the chances of success to the most possible amount they can be is by applying science to your marketing. Good marketing is not about guesswork, and it's not about art, it's not about any of those things. Good marketing is about science. And it's the science of being able to do two things effectively, using data and research to back them up. And the first is being able to accurately identify your who. And that is your target market, meaning the group of people who are most likely to buy your game. That's the first thing. The second thing is, again, by applying data and research to be able to accurately identify your compelling reason, why those people will love your game, and then being able to effectively communicate that in your marketing to the right people. If you can do those two things effectively and backed by real data and real research, that's when you're going to increase your chances as much as you possibly can to achieve your results, which is your favor granted. Okay? The next portion of this presentation is dedicated to the process by which you achieve these results, how you can apply your science to your marketing. And we'll go through it step by step. But before we do that, I'd like to just show how this works in practice with a case study, because I always think that it's easier to visualize when you see how it's being applied in real life. And this is a bit of an oldie but a goodie, a throwback to 2008. We all remember the Wii Fit, right? Some of us do, I guess. But back in 2008, Nintendo released the Wii Fit, and up until that point, Nintendo's user base for the Wii was very largely comprised of families. Right? Remember Wii Sports, those kinds of games, and the console itself was all about bringing families together. And with the Wii Fit, Nintendo wanted to do something a little bit differently. So it went to its in-house marketing team, as well as its advertising agency at the time, which was Goodby Silverstein and Partners, a big agency actually out in San Francisco. And it said to its teams, we have this Wii Fit. We'd really like to expand our user base here. Specifically, we'd really like to onboard moms, and specifically, or yes, moms, women, but moms. And so the marketing team and the advertising agency got together and it said, okay, well, there are millions of moms in the US because this was a US campaign. And there's no way that every single mom is going to want to buy a video game and hardware with it. We need to identify which moms are going to be most likely to do this. We need to identify our target market. And so they started conducting research and surveys and interviews to start gathering data. And what they found was that moms who are looking to lose weight specifically would be the most attracted to this video game. And the reason they believed that was because they discovered a compelling reason. And that compelling reason was women, mothers who are looking to lose weight often try, like most people who are looking to lose weight, multiple exercise programs, right? And it can get really frustrating because you might try something and it's really motivating and fun at first, but then it gets very boring and tiresome and it's frustrating because you don't want to do it and then you don't see results. And that's what was happening a lot with this particular demographic. But the Wii Fit is completely different from any other exercise program out there, right? It is interactive. It changes. It's a little bit sassy if you've ever played it. You know, if you wait for a week and then you get back on, oh, nice to see you again. So it does kind of, interesting, interacting things like that. The other thing the agency discovered was that moms who are looking to lose weight are very heavily influenced as to what exercise programs they try by mommy bloggers. And mommy bloggers are exactly what they sound like. They are mothers who have blogs that write for other mothers. And mothers who are looking to lose weight are specifically very influenced by these people. And so the two teams got together, the in-house agency and then the advertising agency, and they did two things. One, they created a traditional advertising campaign with print and TV and outdoor that showed mothers, people of the demographic, interacting with the Wii Fit and having fun. And the people that they pictured in these ads were definitely of the demographic, but they were fit. They were, doing fun things on the Wii Fit. Everything that these mothers who are looking to lose weight wanted out of an exercise program was displayed in the imagery of this campaign. The second thing they did was they approached the top mommy bloggers and they said, we have a product that we think your readership will love. And what we'd love you to do is we'll give it to you for free. We'd love you to try it out and chronicle your results on your blog. And that's exactly what happened, and the results were enormous. By the end of 2008, the Wii came out in May. By the end of 2008, the Wii had sold 4.5 million units. And that number on its own, you don't know if it's big or small, but just for comparison, the year before, 2007, out of all the games that came out on every single major console, only one had outsold the Wii Fit. Does anyone want to take a guess as to what that was? 2007 major title. It rhymes with Halo 3. Halo 3 was the only game in 2007 to outsell that, and it sold 4.83 million copies, so not too much more. This is the kind of power that science can deliver to marketing. So now we're going to get into the process by which you can apply science. Before we do, just a couple of notes on this process. This is a process that I have used at every single advertising agency and marketing firm that I have ever worked at, except I have modified it a little bit to complement the indie process. Typically, when you see a product marketing process like this, you would always start by identifying your target market, doing your target market research, and then developing a product that is specifically geared toward that market. James talked about this a little bit in his keynote yesterday. The reason you do that when you're developing games at like a massive scale, or like an EA, or if you're developing products at a massive scale, like, Toyota or GE for consumers, the reason you do that is because you can't afford to do anything other than this. You're in it for big profits, and if you don't come out with big profits, that's when you have big layoffs. But that process doesn't really complement the indie process, which again comes from within. So this process here is meant to still apply science to your marketing, but not disrupt the creative genius, because many of the independent developers I talk to, don't want to craft their game off of someone else's desires. It's an expression of themselves. It's a piece of art. So that's what this process is meant to do. And the way that you start this process is by first understanding how your game fits into its competitive context. And what I mean by that is just how you stack up against your competition. You have to understand that before you go into any part of your marketing. And the first step to that, this seems really obvious too, is identifying the platform or platforms that you're publishing to. And the reason this is important is because audiences that play different platforms are very different from one another, so you have to be able to identify where you are publishing to first. You can follow that up with identifying what genre or genres, it can be multiple too, that you fit into within that platform. Once you have those two things, you can start identifying your competitors. I recommend identifying at least 10 to 15 competitors. And I know that seems like a lot. It is a lot. But what that forces you to do is really do your due diligence on identifying who you are up against and making sure that you find all of them. Because if you only look at 2 or 3 competitors, I think you could really be missing out on some other guys out there. It's a good way to inform yourself as to what you're competing against. And also keep in mind that the games you're looking at don't have to be released. You shouldn't just look at games that have been released. Look at games that might be coming down and releasing around or just after the time that you release yours. And there are plenty of ways you can do this. If you're releasing on Steam, you have green light and early access you can look at. Or you can just do a simple web search, your platform, your genre, and the word preview. A lot of games get previewed beforehand. So you've identified your competitors. Now it's time to really get into the nitty-gritty and understand what the product is that they're offering. And for this is time-consuming, but it's definitely something that's very important. It's a very important exercise. You have to play all of their games because you can read the description, but what you get from playing the game versus reading the description is such a deeper understanding of what the product is actually like. And in addition to the games itself, you want to be able to understand what they're doing from a marketing perspective. So making sure that you're watching all of their trailer videos, reading all of their game descriptions, looking to see where they're advertising, what their social media strategy is, everything. So really doing a deep dive on all of your competitors. And after you do that, you are going to feel overwhelmed with all the information that you're taking in. And that's a good thing because that means that you've really exhausted yourself with this exercise. But at the same time, you need an easy way to really look at this information and understand what it's giving you. And that's where a competitive matrix comes in. And a competitive matrix is a tool that marketing people use to easily identify our competitive strengths and our competitive weaknesses versus our competitors. And it looks like a spreadsheet. It is basically a spreadsheet. You have rows and columns and cells. Up along the top, you have your competitors in your game listed first. And then along the side there, you list features. And these don't just have to be in-game features. These can be marketing features. Are they advertising on IGN? Do they have a trailer video? And then comes the fun part. If you like things like lists and checking boxes, you start checking off who has what. And this is when you can really start to tell where your strengths and your weaknesses are. There's two things you want to look for when you're looking at a competitive matrix. One is a pattern like this. If you have an X and no one else does, that could signify a competitive advantage. And if it's a big enough feature, it might even be something that you could build your entire marketing campaign on. You should also look for patterns like this, where everybody else has an X except for you. And I'm not saying that you should change your game based on something like this, but it's definitely something you want to be aware of, because if it's a big enough feature, if it matters enough to your target market, it's something that you might want to address in your marketing materials, or maybe consider re-examining your game if it's going to be that much of a deal killer. So now you have your competitive research done. You know what your genre is. You know what you're stacked up against. Now it's time to identify who you're talking to. And that is your target market. How many people here have heard of that term before, target market, and familiar with it? Okay, good. That's what I figured. I like to define it a little bit differently, but basically, your target market, it's a group of people that share similar characteristics that make them most likely to grant you your favor. And because we're doing the process a little bit backward, identifying your genre is going to be key here. Because when you identify your target market, you use a lot of research that's already available to you to do so. And the way that that research is organized is matching target market to genre. So that's going to be really important as you start going through this exercise. And the places you can start to find that research, I always recommend doing searches for just free online research because it's easily accessible and it's also very indie-friendly budget-wise. A lot of what you find is going to be on things like company blogs, free reports. You just want to make sure that the research is reliable. This is perhaps one of my favorite go-to companies for finding great research. This is a company called Flurry. How many people have heard of Flurry? Okay, great. They have an incredible blog that they fill with such valuable information. And this is an example of just one of their pieces. They call this the Android Gaming Matrix. And what they've done here is they've looked at data from a little bit over 1,300 of the top Android games. They've looked at what gender is each of these games' category most active monthly user. And say, you can see here, if you're creating something like a card battle game, you know immediately what your most viable target market is, right? So males between the ages of 20 to 30 years old. For people who are making Android games and your category or your genre is on here, I definitely recommend looking at this tool because it does a lot of the guesswork for you. Of course, there might be scenarios where you can't find the research you're looking for just by doing searches for free research. In these scenarios, you have the option of paying for research. Most typically, these are reports that have already been done. And usually they cost between a couple hundred to maybe up to $5,000. Usually I see it hover around $2,000. There's always that option. If you have a larger budget and more specific needs, you can always commission reports. You can go to a market research company and ask them for something specific. This costs a little bit more. These usually start around $5,000. It might not be an option for everyone, but it is an option. And finally, you can conduct your own research. I don't recommend this for target market research, at least not until a last resort, just because the kind of research that you're looking for, you need enough participants to make it statistically significant, and sometimes that can be difficult when you're doing your own research. But if your back is up against the wall, you can't find anything anywhere, it's much better to base your marketing on data than guesswork. I won't go through these, but I'll make my slides available after this. These are 8 resources that I use for research. They're all very reliable. They have great reports available. And where I can, I have linked to their free reports. So if you want to check out the slides afterward and click over to these links, I'd recommend that you do so. Now that you have your target market defined, okay, what's next? If we look at the target market that we got from the Flurry matrix, it gives us pretty basic information, men between the ages of 20 to 30 years old, right? But can you really build a marketing campaign off of that little data, off of just demographics? No, you need so much more than that, right? You need things like, what are the members of your target market trying to accomplish? What are their goals for playing games? Where do they buy? When do they buy? How do they make buying decisions? When you get that kind of information, that's what you build marketing campaigns around. That's how you craft that compelling reason and how you build things that really resonate with your target market. And that's where buyer personas come in. So this is another marketing tool that really adds to your target market definition. And what a buyer persona does is it basically personifies your entire target market, but it adds so much more to it. It adds, in addition to the demographic data that you've already gotten, like the age, the location of where your target market lives, it adds behavioral and psychographic data. So behavioral data are activities and habits of your target market. When do they play? Where do they play? And psychographic data is more like their goals for playing. You know, I play social games because I love beating my friends. That's psychographic information. And when we put it all together into a pretty little template, this is what a buyer persona looks like. And you can see how much easier it is to craft your marketing when you're looking at a person's face and when you're speaking to a person rather than this amorphous target market. There's plenty of templates that you can find online. This is one that I've developed and I use that works really well for me. On the upper left there, you can see that we have the demographic data. But up on the upper right, you can see that the majority of the persona is dedicated to behavioral and psychographic data. And there's a reason for that. It's because that's the good stuff. That's what you build your campaign off of. So I just want to read a couple of things here so you can see where we're going with buyer personas and how well they help. So this is Samantha. She's the buyer persona. Samantha plays mobile games to pass the time and compete against friends. Right there, with that sentence, you know exactly why your target demographic is playing games. That is incredibly helpful as you craft marketing. Samantha enjoys the feeling of winning against her real-world friends and goes to great lengths to maintain her dominance, including frequently purchasing coins. So Samantha is a real person that I interviewed after doing target market data or target market research. And the game she's talking about when I say coins is Bejeweled, if anyone was wondering. So right here you know, okay, Samantha makes in-app purchases, but she makes them when she wants to beat friends. That is her motivation for monetizing. And finally, Samantha primarily downloads games that are recommended, currently played by her friends. This is another important piece of data that comes out of this exercise, because right here, what this is telling me is I could spend all kinds of time reaching out to IGN to get a feature story, but the people who are going to be playing my game, it won't even matter because that's not where they go to find out about new games. This tells me that I really need to focus my advertising efforts and my promotion efforts on things like social media and other methods to really influence people-to-people communication. So to create a buyer persona, you start with the research that you conducted by identifying your target market, except you dig so much deeper. Yes, you have your demographic information, you define that a little bit further, but it's really the behavioral and the psychographic data that you're looking for. And a great place to find this data is actually in user reviews of competitor games as well as forums. In those two places, people just open up and they talk about themselves, a lot. So you really get to understand, okay, what about this genre, what about this competitor game do they really love? Do they really hate? People do not hold back on forums and in reviews. So it's a great place to get some of that data. But you are going to have data gaps in this process. You're definitely going to have them. And for those data gaps, you want to fill it with interviews that you conduct. And that's a big part of the buyer persona, is actually talking to people within your target market and asking them questions to get the data that you need. And for that, of course, you start with your list of questions whose answers would give you that data that you need. recruiting interviewees for these interviews. This may sound a little creepy, but Craigslist, or I know in Norway you don't have Craigslist, but I know you have something similar, works really well to do this. I've done this before. You can offer, like a $20 gift certificate and take an hour of someone's time. Maybe more in Norway because $20 gets you about a beer, so maybe $40 or $50. And talk to them. Make sure that they're within your target market. So when you're recruiting someone, put the criteria up there. Men between the ages of 20 to 30. You'll have enough information at this point. And then try to conduct at least 3 to 5 interviews per target market. The rule of thumb is usually start with 3 to 5. Once you can start predicting people's answers, you've probably done enough interviews. And when you have all that information, that's when you can start building your buyer persona. Again, there's plenty of free templates online that you can download and use. I'm not going to go through these, but again, if you want to look at the slides afterward, these are some really good questions to ask your buyer personas in the interview. Okay, you've done your buyer persona research. You have your competitive research. Now you start getting into the fun part of marketing. And this is actually crafting your positioning that's going to go into all of your marketing materials. And we have another marketing tool for this. It's called a positioning statement. And what a positioning statement is basically a 1 to 3 sentence paragraph that talks about how your game fits your target market's needs in a compelling way that's different from your competitors. These positioning statements usually follow a format. You can find all different kind of formats online. This is the one that I like to use. So for your target market, insert your game name, this is where you have your competitive advantage. The best at this, the only one that does this. Among all, insert your genre, games, because your game this is where your compelling reason goes. So I quickly wrote one, getting back to that Wii Fit example, just to illustrate this. I quickly wrote one for that. I have a little note down here. This is not what Nintendo actually uses. I developed this. For mothers looking to lose weight, there's your target demographic. Wii Fit is the most endorsed exercise video game by the world's top mommy bloggers. There's your competitive advantage. Because only the Wii Fit turns the chore of working out into an interactive experience that's fun and proven to be effective. And there's your compelling reason. So now, with this positioning statement, and with the person who you know that you're talking to, you can see that crafting your marketing message becomes very easy. Everyone in your company with these 2 tools can be on the same page. They know who they're talking to. They know how to communicate about it. And this can work for any single one of your target demographics. And now that we have that, we can start applying it to our marketing. And going back to the Wii Fit example, the first step you take here is taking your positioning statement and translating it into whatever kind of medium that you are communicating with. And in this example here, we have print. So we have 2 modes of communication in print advertising. We have the imagery, and we have the copy, which is just a fancy word in advertising for text. I don't know why they call it something different. But the imagery here, you can see we're showing someone in our target market, moms who are looking to lose weight, but we're showing her she's fit and she's having fun and she's interacting with the Wii. Right? And then finally, the text there, the copy, the headline, it says, how will it move you? It doesn't say, will it move you? It just assumes this thing is going to make you move because it is so much fun. So with that headline, it's reinforcing the entire package. Next, we need to take that positioning and distribute it to all of your marketing materials. So you need to be able to identify what marketing materials you need. And for that, I'm going to refer you to my presentation from last year, where I go over all the necessary marketing materials and then how to build your audience. Again, this is really the prequel to that. So just quickly to summarize, good marketing is not about you. Remember that. It's about your strangers. But strangers are not your mom. They need a compelling reason to grant you your favor. And if you want to ensure that that compelling reason is spot on, it needs to be founded in science. And it's the science of starting with your competitive research, identifying your target market based on your genre, building out that target market, getting down to their core psychographic behavioral data with the persona, the buyer persona, crafting your positioning, and finally translating it to all of your marketing materials. And once you do that, launch a targeted and compelling kick-ass campaign. And that's it for me. Thank you. Questions? So I think we have, Ingvild, do we have some time for questions?
Yeah, you have 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, so we have about 15, 20 minutes for questions, if anyone has one. Questions? Lee. Hi. Oh yeah, do we have a microphone for the streaming?
Hello.
Hello.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
So what do you do when you've developed a game that maybe doesn't fit neatly into a particular genre? You know, I mean, a lot of indie games are sort of looking to work outside sort of traditional AAA-driven genre definitions. How would you sort of approach your competitive analysis?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I've encountered that before with some indie clients. I actually encounter that quite frequently for that reason. Because of the way the research is set up, you still have the research kind of conforming to the traditional genres, but what I found to be effective is looking what characteristics in the game can relate to certain ones of those genres, and usually it's a combination of multiple genres. So in that scenario, I would look at those multiple genres, gather the research that I could from my available resources online, but also rely a lot on my buyer persona interviews and see what data I can pull from there. That's typically how I've approached that scenario. Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure. Any other questions? Yes.
So you mentioned that if you've got problems finding data for your game, marketing data, and you can do your own research, can you also, is it a good idea to use marketing campaigns and try different ones and use there as your data, if you can track them?
Yes, you can do that. If you have time to do that, and if you have some budget to do that, that's possible. I would recommend, if you're going to do that, you don't want to do your entire user base. You might want to start with maybe doing a small sample size of people in a very controlled environment, because what you don't want to risk there is alienating people or turning people off with a campaign that's not spot on. But you could almost do like a survey or a user group study with just a couple people, maybe, I don't know, 10 to 15 people, and start doing questions, do you find this compelling? What do you like about this? What do you not like about this? Or if you do something online, making sure that you just control the amount of people who see it. If that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Questions? Oh, one back there. Okay. You guys are so quiet today. Everyone's tired from last night, huh?
Hello. Okay.
Hi.
Thank you for your talk. Really good. I was wondering about your definition of a competitor, because is it like a similar game, or yeah, just wondering your definition for that.
Yeah, well, the way that I've defined it here, and the way that I usually, when I go through this process, is looking at your genre and defining who is going to be competing with you in that genre for the same target market. Sometimes, I guess, if the genre is not matching up, it's really who's going to be competing with you for the same target market. Because typically, if you define your target market well enough, they're with similar characteristics, they're going to be playing probably similar games on the platform, and those are the games that you really want to be looking at. So maybe, I think genre is an easy way to do it. You might spread across multiple genres, so you need to widen it a little bit, but people who are really targeting that same demographic. Yeah. Yes?
I was just wondering, in regards to like interviews and like asking people questions, if you could talk some about like how trustworthy people are, because I feel like a lot of the time people think that they would respond in a certain way to a certain advertisement, but they're probably often wrong.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's why you do more than one interview. I suggest starting with 3 to 5 and seeing how the answers come in. And typically, if you do more than one, if you start interviewing a wider group of people, you'll start seeing patterns. And usually, like if you get one answer like that, but 4 the opposite, you're going to want to go with the 4. And that's why you do multiple. Anyone else? Oh, back there. Is that Aurora back there?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. Nice talk.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you're in a dev team and you have to split your time between doing a lot of different things, how much time should you spend on making personas in, like, let's say you have 6 months to develop a game?
Wow. That's a really good question. And coming from a marketing person, maybe my answer will be a little bit skewed because I think this is an incredibly important exercise. And I think if you don't invest the amount of time it takes to create a reliable persona, you're really going to be doing yourself an injustice by even using it as a tool. In terms of time, I don't know if there's a really good answer there other than enough time to make something that's reliable and accurate, because otherwise it's not worth it, because you're relying on this as a tool to create effective marketing. So I'm not sure if I can really put a quantifiable number to that. Sometimes these things can take a long time because there's a lot of research involved with them. Sometimes if you can get the research online more easily, they can take a shorter time. I think for mobile games, it'll probably take you less time than it will for maybe other types of games. I typically spend about, I guess if you add up all the hours, I probably spend a good solid week to 2 weeks on a good persona, if that kind of gives you time. But split between multiple tasks, it could take much longer than that.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
As last year, thanks so much for a very good talk.
Sure.
My question is, if you do like your marketing research in the United States, and you have a global launch, how well does your marketing research data translate between the different regions?
That's a great question. So that's where some of your demographic information comes in. Different cultures are not the same. So when you're looking at your demographic data, you have to be able to split it into multiple demographics, because maybe people in Norway don't respond the same way as people in the US. Certain cultures you can group together, certain ones you can't. So you do, in that scenario, I would really recommend putting together multiple personas for your key your key geolocations, starting with that? That's a great question. Anyone else? Yes?
So I was just wondering, let's say you have a metagame and you're like a very small indie team or whatever with obviously a very limited marketing budget. Is there any specific places you would recommend where you get most bang for your buck in terms of like marketing, like any specific platforms you can recommend or would not recommend in terms of where to advertise or where to market?
Oh, where to add?
Yeah.
I mean, again, that's going to be really dependent on your demographic. For example, the one that we went over, Samantha, you wouldn't want to advertise on something like IGN or platforms like that, but maybe for your other hardcore gamers, you would. It really depends on target demographic. I find a lot of people who are searching online for games. Google AdWords can be a very effective source. It's just that with Google AdWords, to make that cost effective, you just need to put a lot of time into reviewing the data, seeing which keywords work, seeing which keywords don't, seeing what's most cost effective. Again, that's a tricky question because it's not about you, it's all about them, and it's understanding where they consume media. And that's where you're going to have the most ROI if you place your ads there. Yeah. Sorry, there's not an easy answer for that question. Any other questions? Is that it? Okay, I think that's it. Guys, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Hope that was helpful.